Josiah, welcome along to the podcast. Good to have you with us, mate.
It's so good to be here.
We're talking about your column, Can We Rebuild Together? Your first sentence is very interesting. New Zealand feels like a nation in decline. Ominous sentence. Why is that? What's got us in that frame of mind?
The media paints a very bleak picture. We're familiar with the stats that tell of our woes in healthcare and education. But I think there is a growing sense among the population that things aren't as they should be. We can't ignore the cracks in our institutions because actually we're starting to feel the impact of that. I was thinking recently about conversations I've had with people I know in the healthcare sector, the public system. And there's a sense of despondence or despair about the way things are, but also about how they see things moving forward. There isn't the sense that, we're just about to sort of come up over the hill and see a green valley over the other side. There's a sense of actually, I'm not sure how we're going to fix this. The same with education. A local high school that I drive past, there are classrooms encroaching on the field to deal with a 41% influx in students from 2017.
So it's starting to impact people's everyday lives now, and that's got the feeling of, something is people who've got to sell their houses because they can't afford the mortgage. There's people who've got to get private health insurance because their doctors are saying, like, we don't know if you're going to be able to have this operation through the public system. And there's schools that have to plonk prefab classrooms on their fields because they just don't have enough funding to build.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. All right. So there's that in the air. There's that sense of doom and gloom. But you also point out that we feel more divided, maybe more polarized might be a better way of phrasing that. Is that actually the case? Like, feelings are one thing, but as we know, facts don't care about your feelings,
That's
Josiah.
right.
So how are those facts for us? Are we actually that divided, or we just feel it?
Yeah, well, if facts don't care about our feelings certainly do care about facts. Yes, I think we do feel more divided. Surveys show that there is a growing sense of division. Now, some people think that's a small growth. Other people think it's quite significant. Nonetheless, the feeling is there. If we think about debates about the Treaty of Waitangi, New Zealand's constitution, our history, all of that is quite divisive because politicians and people in the media simplify the debate down to a few key things. And so one of the frames that I've noticed is that some people are for Māori rights and some people are against Māori rights. And that view, which is very black and white, two sides, is a view that doesn't allow for conversation to hear, well, what is people's view of history and how do they see our constitution? What makes for a good society? These are questions that are weighty and they require humility and patience and time as we work these out. But when the media presents it in this way, well, it's war because the battle lines are drawn. And so it's this me versus you, except we're in the same boat. And so we need to figure out a way to paddle forward.
Okay, so the media headlines, doom scrolling makes us feel more divided. But on the issues that, and that's an issue that really matters. That's a really core, deep issue, I think, constitutional, Treaty Waitangi stuff. But are there areas of agreement that we have on what's important and what we want to see, or is it all just, we're done?
Yeah, and this is where I think the hope comes in, because I think you interact with New Zealanders out in the street. They might be quite different to you politically, but there is still something that binds us together as Kiwis.
Not all at war. There's not actually a civil war going on where people are fighting in the streets.
Despite what we see on the media with angry protesters on both sides going at it, whatever the issue. I know a number of people who were at the Waitangi Treaty grounds this year, and they said what struck them was a sense of unity. Yes, there was disagreement and there was a bit of division, but what dominated the headlines was David Seymour getting his mic taken off him.
Yes. People turning their backs on people ignoring them. And
David Seymour owning Guy Williams, he gets destroyed.
That's right.
All of that
the clickbait
stuff.
headlines,
That's right. But actually there was a sense of unity. And an Ipsos poll from October 2024 reveals that those who are on the left and the right spectrum of politics in New Zealand actually have very similar concerns. So I think that the top two concerns were both inflation / the cost of living and healthcare and hospitals. And they were separated only very slightly by a percentage point or so. And even as you go further down a list, as you compare them, the issues again are quite interrelated. You've got crime and poverty, all of these things bound together. And so the question for us politically is less what do we want, because of course we all want better healthcare, a world-class education system. The question is, generally speaking, less about what we want and more about, well, how do we get here? Now, that's difficult when you have politicians and people in the media who are focusing on point scoring and trivial matters. All of last week seemed to be taken up by David Seymour driving a Land Rover up the steps of Parliament. And I'd hate to calculate the time spent on that, on such a trivial matter, and yet it dominated the House and the news cycle. And it's like, well, okay, we can deal with that. That's fine. But there are some really important issues that need to be dealt with now. We need some humility, some charity, and some clear thinking to address these issues and to figure out, well, where do our commonalities lie? What are our common aspirations? And how can we chart a course together to get there?
And so that sort of conversation is bound to have disagreement, which you say is necessary to democracy. But you've also brought up the theatrical side of politics and the kind of performative aspect of it. How is, and then the reaction to that, which is like, David Seymour drives his Land Rover and then everyone loses their minds over it and they spend the week yelling at each other about it. How can we get from that theatrical performative disagreement to ones that actually are helpful, like having a substantive conversation about stuff and moving forward?
I think establishing a common set of facts that we can agree upon is a really good start, because if we don't start in the same place, we can't move together anywhere. So having some kind of shared foundation, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but some sense of commonality really is the launching point for some kind of solution.
Now, just to clarify, that's not saying can't we all just get along, right?
No.
So you're not saying, look, can't we all just get along and stop fighting? You're not doing that, right?
I can show you what total agreement in society looks like. Yeah. It looks like the USSR, Nazi Germany, and plenty of other places around the world. No, so total agreement is not the goal, and that's not what we're after. I'm not so naive as to say, well, why can't we all just get along? Because disagreements do exist. But we need to figure out how we navigate those. And my sense is that for most issues that we're concerned about, there's more commonality than we might think. The red lines maybe are less far apart or close together than we might think. And actually, there's room to figure out, well, how can we plot a course? Because the risk is one government comes in, does something, the next government comes in, changes it again, and there's no momentum. We're always chopping and changing. So that's something that I think we do want to avoid, but it does begin with courageous leadership that's characterized by humility and charity that seeks to understand, well, what do people on the other side of the aisle want? And is there a way that we can work together toward what we all want?
Well, Josiah, that is a very constructive column this week. Thank you for taking us past the theatrics, past the division, and into something a bit more substantive that hopefully can help us move forward on the right track.
Thanks, Jason. New Zealand feels like a nation in decline. The headlines paint a grim picture, and daily life does little to brighten it. Even without the familiar statistics, it's hard to shake the feeling that, by most measures, things are getting worse. The cracks in our institutions are becoming impossible to ignore. For doctors, nurses, and most importantly patients, the failures of the public health system are a daily reality. Just last week, a colleague was advised by their GP to get private health insurance, such was their doctor's lack of confidence in the public system. Education is under strain too. Driving past a local high school, the pressure is obvious. Prefab classrooms now encroach on the field, a response to a 41% surge in enrolments since 2017. Schools are stretched, teachers are exhausted, and students are left to face the consequences. Institutions require maintenance, and many of ours are long overdue. But before we can rebuild, we must confront a deeper challenge: our growing inability to work together. New Zealanders feel more divided than ever. The noise of petty disputes and parliamentary theatrics suggests that common ground is an endangered species. Whether it's the reaction to David Seymour's Land Rover stunt or the latest row over school lunches, our politics seems to revolve less around solutions and more around point scoring. But is the divide as deep as it seems? An Ipsos poll from October 2024 suggests otherwise. Across the political spectrum, New Zealanders largely agree on the country's biggest problems. Healthcare and the cost of living remain the top concerns for both left and right-leaning voters. The real question is often not what we want, better healthcare, a world-class education system, but how to get there. Disagreement is necessary in a democracy, but productive debate requires a shared foundation. If we can't agree on basic facts, we can't move forward together. And when going viral becomes more important than telling the truth, constructive debate breaks down. Cooperation is still possible. While outrage dominates the headlines, there are quieter, unglamorous examples of politics done well. On Waitangi Day, Ngāi Tahu leader Justin Teeper pointed to one. Quote, Ngāi Tahu and the National Party haven't always seen eye to eye on every policy, but there is a tradition of pragmatic and principled engagement between us, end quote. The recent tweaks to the Golden Visa scheme offer another, albeit mixed, example. In 2022, then Labour Minister Stuart Nash introduced the Active Investor Plus visa to attract growth-focused foreign investment. Instead, investment from migrants plummeted from $2.2 billion pre-COVID to just $70 million. Recognising the shortfalls, the current government refined visa requirements. Rather than playing politics, Nash acknowledged the improvements. Common ground exists, and pragmatic cooperation does occur, but it's rare. As voters, we should demand more from our elected representatives. Part of that includes modelling humility in our own discussions, both in person and online, playing the ball and not the man, and always having truth as our highest goal. We get the leaders we deserve. If we want better leadership, we must expect better of ourselves.